It's funny that you were saying about having these conversations earlier, because that's my mission in 2026. I
Yeah.
do these workshops where I'm trying to get the adult children to broach the subject with their parents because they're not happening soon enough. I always tell them,
No.
you're kicking the can down the street and you're going to have this conversation anyways. Have it now when it's not, the stress level is low,
Yeah.
because I always say I get called in when there's a fire. It's,
Yeah.
oh my God, mom took a fall. She can't go back home. What are we going to do? Like, how is this going to all go? And they're making decisions in a really stressful environment.
All right. Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here with another episode of The Key to the City of Angels. I'm super excited to have Lucy on the show. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, you work with, it's called Kind Organizer. Is that
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That go into what that is and how you got into this space.
So it's called, so I am a professional organizer and
Okay.
it's a move management company. So what that means is, I always say it's more than packing a box. We help families and seniors in the downsizing process or moving process. So
Okay.
whether you're selling your home and going into a different one, or moving in with family, or going into assisted living, or going cross country, there's a lot of moving pieces of that puzzle. And especially
Mhm.
as you get older, or if you're a family that is dual income, working full time, you have kids and sports and all the things, we all know that moving is one of the most stressful life events ever.
For sure.
Imagine that if you're, like I said, a young couple and you're busy and you're working, or you're a senior that's 78 and can no longer have the mobility you had once upon a time, and you have to go to something smaller because your house is just too much. So we help families and seniors with that entire process. And it's very much an a la carte service. They can say, Lucy, we're just going to pack up the few things that we want, ship it out to New Jersey, and then we're going to do an estate sale and then put the house up for market and sell as is. Some
Hmm.
may say, no, we want to get the most money out of our home and we're going to move to this assisted living. Help us identify what we can take, what we can't. What once upon a time, our king bed was great for 30 years, but now it's time to downshift and go into a full size bed. And so we
Hmm.
help families and seniors with the entire process. So when we go and we meet and say, what do you need? Where would you like to go? And what goals would you like to achieve? What challenges are you facing? And we basically figure out all the pieces of the puzzle. And yes, we do pack
Um,
families. We help them sort and declutter. We do a lot of donations. We do assist in the process of an estate sale if it warrants that. And then if they're going to put their house on the market, we will team up with the realtor and we will figure out what needs to happen to get to the house in showing condition, whether that's
mhm.
getting it down to zero and having it professionally staged, or if the house has nice furnishings and you doing a partial stage. We don't know. And so the way we got into this is, my first client was my own elderly aunt 15 years ago. She had no children. Her mom had passed away. She had literally no one around her. And at the time, I was in sales and I was traveling all over the country. And on my weekends, I would come in and help her through this process. And we went through all the gamut of emotions of, never mind, I don't want to sell the house. And the next day, oh my God, I'm going to die in this house because it was a dangerous house for her. It wasn't the best of neighborhoods. And trying to go through all of her belongings for 40 years, it was daunting to say the least. And it was my
Sure.
first experience. And also having that familial relation where I was the niece that really didn't grow up with her, but trying to help her navigate through all this because at the end of the day, she was alone and it was the best thing for her and she knew it. But it was back and
Mhm.
forth, two step forwards, one step back. it was so difficult to take on, especially I would only be there on the weekends and she would get nothing done throughout the week. And so we helping keep that process moving. And so we finally got the house ready. I teamed up with the realtor. We got her house sold, moved her into a gorgeous 55 plus community. She couldn't have been happier. And then she told all of her friends, and then lo and behold,
Yeah. Here you are.
the business started. And so at first I did it just as a side hustle. And
Hmm.
then I realized I'm pretty good at this. So let's go full fledged. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it all
Very
started.
cool.
Yeah.
I would imagine whether it's for yourself or even when you work with clients, it's hard for parents to listen to the kids or listen
Mhm.
to the nieces and nephews. Like, I changed your diaper and you're trying to tell me what to do.
I
I
talk
would
a
imagine
lot.
that happens,
Oh, all the time. I talk
right?
about it's called the role reversal. And there is a huge shift in power control. The parent doesn't want to be told what to do. The adult child doesn't want to tell the parent what to do because it's
Well,
awkward. But the reality is that they do have to come together and meet that goal. And I often say for families that there's a lot of conflict or there's that sense of fighting over control. I always say, listen, save your relationship and bring me in. And then I become good cop, bad cop, like both
yeah.
ways. And so it's really funny because eventually it becomes Lucy said I can take that. Lucy said you can't take that. And it's all of
Mm,
a sudden, it saves that dynamic between them a little bit. It's an external voice saying something that makes sense or that will or will not work. Because I always tell my clients at the end of the day, if you want to take that king size bed in a very 10 by 12 room, you're not going to have room to walk around it. Is it going to affect me? No, but it
right.
will affect you. So which way do you want to go? And so sometimes having that outside voice really helps it click and remove the
Yeah.
emotions out of it.
I've done that before. When I've
Mhm.
had potential clients where they're like, hey, I gotta sell my friend's place, or even just, hey, there's a like disagreement between me and my wife on how to handle the situation. I'll be like, I'll be the dick. Like, you just tell
100%.
me, let's talk about what the goal is,
Uh-huh.
and then I don't have a problem being that person.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's like,
Exactly.
if you don't like me, you don't like me. And then even on the sense of, even if you don't want to work with me at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm not being like honest and direct up front, I've noticed in the past it has killed me later on.
Yeah. 100%.
Right?
When I selected the name The Kind Organizer, for me, there's a huge difference between being kind and being
Mhm.
nice. And for
Okay.
me, being kind means telling you the truth. Of course,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be mean about it, but I'm not going to tell you what
Sure.
you want to hear because at the end of the day, who's it going to help? No one. And so the running joke with my team is I'm always bad cop. They get to be good cop. So that good cops
Mm,
always continue moving forward, but bad cop will take the brunt of the stress and the dynamic when there's a lot of challenging events. And so we will have those honest conversations. But I'm very upfront with my clients.
yeah.
I will say, I'm going to tell you the truth. And what you decide how to move forward is up to you. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yes.
understand that dynamic.
Yeah. It's like, I don't mind it.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'd be nice to always be the nice guy, but it doesn't always work out that way.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk. It's called the, was it Silver Tsunami, right?
Uh-huh.
That's this big trend, and it's happening across, like, you pick an industry, and we're
Mhm.
seeing all these businesses for
Mhm.
sale that we didn't see before. We are seeing people downsize.
Yeah.
So, where are these people leaving, and where are they going to? What have you been noticing?
So Southern California is its own
Sure.
animal. For the seniors that are get to an age or a physicality where they are just not able to do for themselves anymore. And it may be as simple as the upkeep of the home is just too much or it's dangerous or
Yeah.
they're isolated or whatever the reason is that they have to leave their home. More often than not, they're going into assisted living
Okay.
or they're going into a much smaller, more manageable home. More often than not, it's independent living, 55 plus community. There's a lot of independent communities where seniors are still active, but they just don't need the 4,000 square foot home anymore. A little 1,100, 1,000 square foot apartment is more than enough. And they actually join communities of people that are in the same boat as they are. And so
Hmm.
there's that social activity as well. Now, depending on their medical diagnosis, sometimes that's not the case, and they do have to go into memory care or, like I said, assisted living, where they have assistance with showers and medication and things like that. And then
Sure.
often a lot are going in with family members as well. And
Hmm.
so there are times when we are contracted not only to downsize their homes and get them moved, but also figure out, okay, so we have this granny suite that's only 500 square feet. How do we make mom feel at home? But still, we can't completely fill up our home with our things. So there's those like puzzles. And a lot of the times we send family over across the states because the kids, they went to college in New York and they ended up staying there. And then they're stressed out that mom and dad are still in Southern California all by themselves and the grandkids. And so sometimes that decision is to go cross state and sell their home here. But those are the main areas where people are going. But I will tell you, there is a shortage. There is a
Oh, I'm
shortage of
sure.
options.
Because I do sell, even right now, I have two properties for sale, both with accessory dwelling units, ADU. And I just sold one recently that had a tenant in place. First, these are vacant. The
Mhm.
majority of the time, I'm seeing buyers coming through wanting them vacant for their family.
Mhm.
So I tell people, I'm like, hey, look, this is great rental income. They're like, we're not here for the rental income.
Exactly. That's honestly the ideal scenario. The ideal
Right?
scenario, if because then it's easier on the family in the sense that they're the proximity, and in an emergency you're there, and if they're not
Hmm.
fully dependent yet, it's an ideal situation because they have their own privacy, but you can keep an eye on them. My parents
Right.
are still independent, but
Hmm.
we have a safety feature on their stove because my mom forgets to turn off the stove.
You never know.
We're all, no, we're installing this. And, but my brother is 15 minutes away, which is great. But eventually it's going to get to the point where I'm going to need them in my backyard type of thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and those even in our family, we've had those conversations. Like, I don't think enough people are having the conversations because you're better off having the conversations now when the parents are in the right frame of mind, when you
Mhm.
have an idea of their financial situation. Because
Yeah.
what I've noticed even here is a lot of these, we'll call them seniors, I guess, for the sake of
Mhm.
conversation, they're
Mhm.
going into condos,
Right.
but they're paying cash
Mhm.
because they sold their home and
Right.
the money's tax free. So it's do it now while it's easier.
Mhm.
Or, like, for example, I was talking to someone who was thinking about selling their grandfather's home. Grandfather was still around, but he was much older, like on his last, toward the end of life.
Yeah.
But we actually talked, like, should we sell? Should we not? And I was like,
Mhm.
it's up to you. And I'm like, this sounds morbid, but if you wait till after he passes away, then you have the step up basis for taxes.
Right.
It's versus you're only selling now because you absolutely need the money because it had appreciated so much because he owned it forever. Right. So, how, like, when you're talking with these people and you're like, okay, you should sell now or you should move now. How are you navigating those conversations, or what signs are you looking for to determine, yeah, it's time for you to move on?
So I typically don't advise people whether they
Okay.
should move or they should not. What I do talk to them about are the realities of their situation.
Okay.
And so I think one of the biggest stressors about seniors and families coming to the decision of whether or not to sell the house is the fear of the unknown. They have no
Okay.
idea what their options are. And so
Hmm.
what I do find is a lot of people do there are these beautiful assisted living communities that are seriously, I want to move in. There's like executive chefs and let's go to Laguna for the day and like all these
It's
amazing activities.
expensive.
It's so expensive.
Oh,
Having said that, a lot of seniors have, like I said, they're in that in between phase where they're not completely checked out, there's
Mm,
still some social life left. And, or if they're isolated, it's because there's no one around them anymore. And so these communities isn't just about the beautiful location. It's about that interaction and getting social again. And, but like you said, they are private pay. And so a lot of seniors have to sell their home in order to be able to afford that. Having said that, depending on what the senior's needs are, whether it's medical, whether it's cognitive, whether it's financial, we get a good feeling of, at least I do. I speak to the family and I find out what are the concerns, where are I help them fill in the blanks. For example, and I often have these meetings with the siblings. So
sure.
once the parents say, yes, it's okay, I want my kids involved, okay. And I will have these Zoom meetings. I've had up to 9 siblings on a Zoom call.
That must have been fun,
Yeah, talk about reining people in.
right?
And mom had advanced Alzheimer's. And
Mm,
so she was still in the home, and there was a lot of, what do we do with mom? Do we take turns taking care of her? We need a full-time caregiver, but we can't afford that. Believe it or not, full-time caregiving is 10 times more expensive than assisted living. And
you lose the economies of scale.
oh, 100%. If you need
Got it.
24-hour care, you're talking over 100 grand a year in just caregivers.
Mm,
And that's not sustainable for many.
no,
And so we talk about the options with the family. A lot of them don't even know that memory care exists, as far as a lot of them think of the convalescent homes of the 80s. It's not that anymore. It's much more
right.
structured. When memory care, the activities are based for the people in those levels. And so it's just educating the family of what their options are and really helping them make an informed decision at that point. And if I don't know the answer, I usually know who does. And so if
Yeah,
they're talking about, we're worried about the tax implications, how long can we make this money last? Okay, listen, it's time for you to talk to the CPA and the financial advisor together and figure out a money plan. If there's a lot of conflict between the families and 2 siblings just won't agree with the other 4, I said, okay, it's time to get maybe an executor of the trust and maybe have them carry out mom and dad's wishes, because you all can't come together as well, or have a fiduciary come in and take over. There's, again, every situation is different. And so I just look at the overall picture. I listen to what the concerns are, and I help them start to fill in the blanks from there if I
right.
don't know the answer.
People like me, we're
Mhm.
smartasses, not know-it-alls. So if we don't know the answer, we find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't try to know everything. And if someone does claim to know everything, they're probably not the person you want to work with,
Yeah. I know a
right?
little bit of many things. Yeah.
You know enough to start the conversation.
Correct. Yeah. It's funny that you were saying about having these conversations earlier, because that's my mission in 2026. I
Yeah.
do these workshops where I'm trying to get the adult children to broach the subject with their parents, because they're not happening soon enough. I always tell
Oh,
them, you're kicking the can down the street, and you're going to have this conversation anyways. Have it now when it's not, the stress level is low,
yeah.
because I always say I get called in when there's a fire. It's,
Yeah.
oh my God, mom took a fall. She can't go back home. What are we going to do? Like, how is this going to all go? And they're making decisions in a really stressful environment.
I've noticed that people don't start having those conversations until somebody else has passed away and it becomes a shit
Mhm.
show.
Or
Like,
somebody gets
because
injured.
somebody gets injured, something
Mhm.
happens. So, like how we know a little bit about everything. As you get older, you actually get in your arteries for your heart, you get calcium buildup. So you have people who are totally healthy, they exercise every day, and all of a sudden they have a random heart attack. And it's just this stuff is natural, but insurance doesn't cover the testing unless you've already done it. So
Mhm.
it goes back to, yeah, this person just had a heart attack out of the blue. What's going to happen? What happens if they're in bedridden? Do we need to make those moves now? So how do you work with, because as real estate agents, we don't have those conversations with people necessarily. So how are you coaching agents on how to navigate some of this, or how to even start some of these conversations with people where I was like, hey, I know you're looking to buy or sell, but have we talked about your parents?
So honestly, I get called the other way around first.
Fair.
Usually A lot of adult children will call me and say, "Oh my God, my parents have to go and they won't listen." And I
Mm.
heard you can help. That's what I hear.
Right, that's the word.
I heard,
From
I
the
heard you're
can
gonna.
down the street, the can said to call you.
I get it all the time. And they said, "I heard you convinced so and so's parents." I'm like, I didn't convince them. I just told them their options and the reality of what they're going to face. Funny enough, realtors call once, first of all, a lot of realtors don't know what a move manager is. But
Right.
once they figure it out and it clicks, they all call.
You're part of the team. You're like in this list of vendor list. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
for sure.
And they're like, call Lucy and she'll convince them to get it moving and keep the ball rolling. And because one of the big things for seniors in particular, they'll say, "Oh, I want to sell my house and I want to downsize, but it's going to take me like a year to downsize my home." And
Mm.
as a realtor, you don't know what the market's doing. You don't know, you don't want to, you can sell a house at any time, but you don't want to do it during Christmas. And
Right. Some timing matters.
yeah, exactly. Ideally, you want to list in the spring, that
Mhm.
type of thing. And so when you hear, when realtors hear a year, is it really going to happen? And when I hear a year, I say, oh my God, there's so much can happen and you can get injured. You can get a diagnosis. There's all these I see all the other stuff. And typically they'll call me in, or the family members or the realtors or the assisted living communities, because the senior will come and tour and say, "Yeah, maybe in a year I'll do this." And they'll say, "Listen, call Lucy, call the kind
Yeah.
organizer," and then they'll help you with that process. And so it's sometimes, like I said, it's the fear of the unknown and not being able to really see the forest for the trees type of thing,
Yeah.
because they're so in it. And we start those conversations, and I don't have a one size fits all answer, because everybody's different. Everybody's
Yeah.
situation is different. The dynamics are different. Families different.
So I sold a home. It was in like kind of like the Sun Valley Burbank area of
Mhm.
LA. And it was an executor situation. The person was still alive, but she
Mhm.
had to move to assisted care. It By the time we started the conversation, because I knew the executor for a long
Mhm.
time, she was a past client of mine, to when we actually launched for sale was 18 months.
Yeah.
And it was little things like, hey, let me help you post stuff on Facebook Marketplace to get it
Yeah.
sold.
Yeah.
You know, people's like, oh wow, that home sold in a week with multiple offers. I know the entire process. And it was also, to your point, as a realtor, I had to update my client on, hey, here's what's going on in the market, all that. I knew I was going to get the listing, but I
Right.
never want to assume. So
Yeah.
you're right. As a realtor, it's, oh, a year from now, if you don't keep up with them on
Yeah.
what's going on, you
Yeah.
can easily lose the listing.
Yeah. And like I said, a lot of our realtors that we partner up with, they'll say, "Hey, go meet with this person.
Right.
We'll have a conversation," because my consultations are complimentary, but we'll have a conversation. I will ask what it is you want to achieve. What's your timeline? And this isn't boasting. This is the reality. They think,
No, for sure.
"Let's do this in 6 months." Okay. And I say, okay. And we'll come in and then we'll start the process. And then they realize, oh, this isn't that bad. Or, oh, we can and we speed up the process because there's that guidance. It's like, why do you go to the gym and get a trainer? You know how to usually you know how to use most of the machines, but there's a
Right.
sequence that it'll optimize your workout routine.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with what we do. Yes, you know how to pick out of your closet what clothes you wear and what you don't wear. But if you look at your entire house at the same time, people get overwhelmed and they just a little bit blocked and don't know which way to turn. And so we help cut that down.
I'd imagine it's also a little bit of an accountability thing
It is.
on your end.
It is a little bit. Yeah, it is a little bit of that, where we had a client that was working full time and she was ready to list her home and move out of
Mhm.
state. And she knew what she had to do.
Yeah.
She didn't get herself to
We
bring to do it.
it's like we all know
Yeah.
not to go out to eat every day because it
Yeah.
costs us money, but it's help to have someone tell us,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And it just guiding in the process. Okay, today we're going to work on this. And do we really need to take that? And let me remind you how much it costs to ship cross country. Do you really want to take that?
That's
So
fair.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. what's like the fastest you've been able to help with the transition versus the longest? And have there ever been any commonalities? Like the people who've been able to move in a weekend, exaggerating, this type of personality versus someone's like, no, dude, you took 2 years.
Yes. So the people that struggle to let go of things and attach
Yeah.
emotion to things, or there's a lot of reasons why people struggle to let go. I have a whole
Sure.
workshop on it. But the people
Right.
that struggle to let go of their things are the ones that take the longest. The ones that are not emotionally attached to their things are the ones that go in a flash. Like I have, like I people always when they call me they say, "Oh, I don't have that much." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Let's open the closets and the drawers and the
Right.
garage and the attic and never did I know how many basements there were until I started working in Pasadena.
Oh,
I'm
for
sorry,
sure.
sun is totally shifting here. Can you see my face?
Uh, I can. Yeah.
And I had two homes, exact same size, 6,800 square feet, both of them,
Massive.
both of them.
Yeah.
And one had an active family, one was a widower. And the widower said, "This, I want this and this. The rest sell in an estate sale, stage the house, get it on the market." The other one had thousands upon thousands of items and had to look at
Mm,
every single thing and make a decision on every
mm,
single thing that they wanted. And the numbers in the difference is astronomical
wow.
between, I'll just give you one number. The mover for the widower was $2,000. The other one was hitting over 20 grand in just moving fees. And I always say it's not about the size of the house. It's about how much stuff you decide to keep and how much stuff you want to look through. I always say, if you haven't seen something in it, it's very unlikely you're going to ever need it again. But
Yeah.
some people really struggle with that.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, if I haven't touched it for, let's call it 9 months, because I learned
Mhm.
that in college. When I
Mhm.
came home from college, when I was like, do you want this? I'm like, if I haven't needed it for the last 9 months, I don't know why I would need it for the next 9 months.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And then when you
Right?
have adult children, there's always it's different across the generations. And so when you have
Sure.
adult children, they'll say, "Let me ask my son or let me ask my daughter." And so we actually have a way to streamline that as well. We have project management software where we can upload their
Okay.
like all their belongings of the daughter, and if she lives in New York she just can go online, see what all her belongings are and say on
Um,
there, "No, I don't want that, donate that, trash that, that shipped to me." And
oh,
rather
that's
than,
cool.
yeah, rather than have
That's really
mom
cool.
call the daughter 20 different times or
Right?
sit there waiting for the response, we just zoom through it. But again, the big difference is how attached to things people are. And
Yeah.
then, and to be honest, at the beginning, it's also difficult for them in our situation where we're strangers going into their homes. And
Yeah.
so we're very cognizant of that. But eventually, we start to build relationships with our clients and they realize, "Oh, my opinion does matter. I am being listened to. They are treating my things with respect. They are
Hmm.
honoring my wishes." But all that does come at a cost. I always tell them, for example, paperwork is another thing. Oh my God, the amount of
Mm.
paperwork is
Oh,
insane. And we'll say, "Listen, you're going to 1,000 square feet. You can't take 6 filing cabinets of papers you haven't looked at in forever." And
yeah.
so they'll say, "I have to sort through all that." But if you have to be out in 2 weeks, you don't have the time to do that. And we'll figure out something that works for them, but we'll do
Yeah.
something like pre-sorting. Like we'll look real quickly and throw away all the old house bill, like electricity bills and junk mail, and we'll sort through it. But if we see something personal, we'll set it aside. If we see financials, we'll set it
Mm.
aside. Something that should be reviewed later, we'll set it aside, but we keep the timeline going.
Yeah, I always wondered that because it was an old neighbor of mine when I lived in another house. and she was like kind of like a social worker, so she had all her case files.
Mm,
But every time her garage opened up and I just
mhm,
see the piles of stuff, I always got concerned. I'm like,
mhm.
someone's gonna have to go through that.
Yeah, it just depends on the situation. But I had a client that was an accountant, and oh my
Mhm.
Jesus,
Oh,
he had
oh,
his tax
I
returns.
come from two generations of accounting. My dad and CPA and my grandfather were CPAs.
Yeah, he had tax returns from like the 70s. And we used to call him our pineapple because he was prickly on the outside but sweet inside.
Nice.
And we'd say, Mr. Pineapple, it's time to let these go. And he's, yeah, okay. And we shredded everything. That shredding bill was expensive, let me tell you, but
I can
because there were
imagine.
financials and they had to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, you have to be super sensitive
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all that. So you mentioned the siblings. So and then you mentioned you dealt with someone that had nine siblings. So how are you? Because it's you're talking about the personality of the elderly person, the senior. Now you're dealing with nine personalities
Mhm.
of managing. How are you navigating? How are you navigating some of that?
So I bring them, okay, more often than not, and I hate to say it, but more often than not, there's usually one or two that have conflict for whatever reason.
There always is. There's always that one sibling.
Oh,
It's never me. I'm not that sibling.
no.
It's always somebody else.
Yeah, sometimes you have your type A,
Hmm.
sometimes you have the one that's after the money and doesn't want their inheritance spent in assisted living. Sometimes you have just the nervous child that can't send up to the parent, that type of thing. And so, first of all, I always ask the parent, am I allowed to speak to your children? And they'll say yes or no. And more often than not, it's their suggestion, right?
Hmm.
And at that point, I find out who's the power of attorney. So there's a power of attorney financial and there's a power of attorney for health. And so legally, I have to follow the power of attorney for financial. Now, if parents still have their own, they're in their full senses and still have control over, they're the boss. And
Sure.
even if they don't, I always tell the siblings, at the end of the day, I work for your mom, not for you guys. And so at the end of the day, we're going to do what's best for mom. Everybody's in agreement. That's what we're here to do, right?
Hmm.
Nobody ever says no.
Fair
So
enough.
that's how we start. And so we talk about what that looks like. And when I can usually tell who's going to come up with a different excuse per se because they don't want to sell the house or whatever.
Mm.
And so then we offshoot and really talk about what the concerns are. And then I usually answer a lot of the objections. And once they run out and then they get to the core of it, then they usually back down or they'll admit it. And then another conversation starts. So if it's about money, really. But that's how you navigate it. Just at the end of the day, you just center it around the parent and what's best for them and what the options are and how to help navigate that. And like I said, and I give them a lot of information and the experts in, for example, if mom is at the beginning of dementia, but she's still lucid, like where does that land her? Because she's still
Mm.
cognizant. She can't go completely into memory care because that's jarring. And so we
Sure.
start talking about that. And I said, look, this person's an expert. They're a placement advisor. They know all the places in the area. We can start talking about that. You can look at the financials. This is what you need to know, like what your mom and dad can afford. What is this going to look like for them? Dad doesn't have dementia, but mom does. So again, it's all information, things that they don't know, and then they can make an informed decision. But if I ever see that there is a sibling that is not out for the best of the parent, if they're not the power of attorney, then I start directing my attention to the power of attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. At some point, someone has to kind of flex their muscle and be like, "Look, I'm the point of
Mhm.
contact." Someone has to be the decider, the deciding
Right.
factor. Hey,
Mhm.
look, I know I had to be an executor for an estate years ago, and I just remember telling everyone, like, "Look, I'm going to piss people off. I just am. I
Yeah.
already know going into this, I am. But
Mhm.
decisions have to be made. They have to be made quickly.
Yeah.
Like things have to happen."
Yeah. 100%.
Lucy, this has been quite amazing stuff. I actually really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
I have a website. It's www.kindorganizer.com. My email is very simple, kindorganizer@gmail.com. And you can find my phone number on there. We're based in the San Gabriel Valley, which is,
Okay.
like I said, 30 minutes east of Pasadena, approximately. And
Yeah.
we service about a 50-mile radius, approximately.
Okay.
Unless there is a senior that's all by themselves, we'll get on a plane, we'll figure it out, we'll go get them. So,
Appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, nice. I like that. 50-mile radius, so driving could be anywhere from an hour to 3 days.
exactly.
Right, so somewhere in that
In
range.
Southern California, yes. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. Okay, Lucy, thank you so much again for coming on the show. And for everyone watching or listening, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Want to keep unlocking the secrets to building real wealth in Los Angeles? Stick around for the next episode. Tap the video on screen to keep watching.